Hi, my name is Martha Van Berkel, and I'm the CEO at Schema App. I'm going to share today about connected schema markup, how to do your schema markup properly, and how it informs knowledge graphs. This is my knowledge graph. It shows who I am and how I connect and relate to other things on the web. From this, you can tell that I'm an alumni of Cisco Systems, that I also went to University of Queens. I have a degree in engineering, went to MIT. I'm the co-founder of Schema App. I'm Canadian, and I used to own an Austin Healey Sprite. Now, what's interesting about my car is it also was the star in a movie called Losing Chase that was directed by Kevin Bacon. And so Kevin Bacon used to drive my car. So what you can infer from this is, one, I'm 2 degrees from Kevin Bacon, but also that you're 3 degrees from Kevin Bacon. And the same inferencing is what Google does when it's trying to match a searcher's intent with an answer. And that's why building these knowledge graphs are so important. And this whole concept isn't new. Tim Berners-Lee, way back in 1999, was talking about this idea that someone could crawl and analyze the web and understand how information is linked, or so the relationships between things, and that this would create a semantic web. And when this was possible, our day-to-day mechanisms of living would actually be handled from machine to machine. And so this is like no different than today as we ask the weather or ask information to our Google Home or Alexa to service us and help us do our day-to-day tasks. And so in preparation for my trip to the UK for Brighton SEO, I started asking some questions about our Queen. You see, the monarch is not just the Queen of England, but also the monarch that resides over Canada. And so I was asking questions like, what is the Queen's full name? And, how old is she? And, what year did she actually become the Queen? And when she dies, who will become king? And that's when I landed on Prince Charles. And I realized that I didn't know that much about him. And so I wanted to know questions about where did he go to school? And it turns out he didn't go to school at Eton College like his sons, but instead he went to a school called Gordonston, which is in Scotland. And then I was like, well, who else went to Gordonston? And it became obvious that, his father, Prince Philip, went there, but also David Bowie's son, Duncan Jones, and also a member of the Getty family. And so it was really interesting then that I could actually say, well, look at the Queen's knowledge graph. I know who her spouse is, who her child is, where Prince Charles went to university or went to school, and other alumni, connecting then the Queen to David Bowie's son. And what's interesting is we now know this knowledge graph and relationship between things. We can actually see it showing up in search results as well. So the Queen, like in her knowledge graph on the right in the knowledge panel, you can see it lists out her children. The images also relate to other things that are connected, including her husband, Prince Charles, and even, questions that are related, including the one I asked around her successor. We see something similar also in image search, where again, other sort of key entities on her knowledge graph show up in the search results, like Prince Philip or maybe her corgi. And so these knowledge graphs are really created by triples. Now, let me give you some examples of what a triple is. The Queen and the spouse and Philip. So it's defining 2 things and then the relationship between them. Prince Charles and Gordonston and the fact that he's an alumni of there. Or Harrods Shopping and the UK for where its area is served. And so it's really a subject, a predicate, and an object. But the reason I use the word property here is because it also relates to schema markup. And when we actually link, a class to a property to then another object, we're in fact creating triples. And so it really comes down to then, if you want to sort of inform the knowledge graph around your business or around anything, you can choose to leave it to chance and let Google kind of figure out those relationships, or you can drive and take control of it and inform those knowledge graph and those triples through really proper, robust schema markup. And so let's go through a couple things to do when actually trying to build this related, connected schema markup. The first thing to remember is that when you're using properties in schema.org, you want to make sure that you're using the most specific possible, and that this then sort of provides the strongest sort of relationship between the two. And so here I've been talking about Queen Elizabeth, so that would be person. class or type of schema markup. And within person, there's different ways of making those relationships. And you can see here it has everything from address, affiliation, alumni of, award, birth date, birthplace, things that are related to that person. And so here I was trying to figure out, like, how do I relate Queen Elizabeth with her husband, Prince Philip? And so does the Queen just know Prince Philip? That would be sort of a very light relationship. Is the Queen the funder of Prince Philip? Probably yes, but is that the most specific? The fact is no. The most specific way that I can relate the two of them is by saying the Queen's spouse is Prince Philip. Now, let's look at something that's a bit more realistic in our world of search engine optimization. So here we have a beautiful cafe. We're trying to talk about that specific local business. And then there's also a high-end video on the website. And I want to be able to relate these two things because the video is actually about the cafe. And so figuring out sort of how two things relate is actually quite complicated. And in fact, my co-founder, Mark, as he was sort of endeavoring to do this back in 2014, it was just like, oh my goodness, the schema.org, website reads like a foreign dictionary. Wouldn't it be great to have a tool that says how two different types of things or two different classes can be related? And so he created this tool, which is available on our website for free, called Schema Paths. And Schema Paths allow you to select those two different classes and then actually see what the paths are between them. So here I have selected a cafe or coffee shop, and then also a video object to see how we relate those two. And you can see here, so for a cafe to a video object, we can use the property subjectOf. So the cafe is the subject of the video object. Or on the reverse side, we can say the video is about the cafe. Now in this one, I would likely probably choose the subjectOf. And therefore on that homepage of that cafe, as I was creating my schema markup, I would then say, subject of this video. And therefore the video would be nicely nested under the coffee shop, which is the main topic of the page. So let's look at another example. So Standard Life is a financial organization that's in the Gherkin building, and it offers financial services. And so if we were to then go to Schema Paths and put in, how the organization relates to service, there's actually not a great way to relate those things. Additional type that's listed there is not really a great application for it. And so instead, when we look at the service to the organization, there's a very clear sort of relationship called provider that I think would be a really good fit. So when we talk about the financial service, we would say the provider is Standard Life in a way to sort of connect those two things very clearly. Now, I was having a little fun. It turns out that there's a schema.org type for volcano and another for gas station. And so, the silly part of me was like, how would we relate these two things? And as it turns out, the volcano can contain a place, which could be a gas station, or the gas station could serve an area, which is a volcano. Again, Schema Paths allows you to connect really random things, even a volcano and a gas station, but in a way using the schema.org vocabulary to again inform those triples to inform your knowledge graph. My other advice is to use really strong connectors. And I've used some examples here around about, mentions, and subjectOf. These are great properties to link topics together or things together. Let me show you some examples. So this news article is very specifically about Queen Elizabeth. Now, again, if your website doesn't talk about Queen Elizabeth specifically, you could also then, instead of putting a page that talks about her, you could actually link to the Wikipedia definition for Elizabeth. And Wikipedia is great because it's a well-known, trusted source for defining things or entities. And so, when possible, you can use this. We often use Wikipedia for area served if we're defining a region or a city or a state. And you can also use it, again, sort of to relate to specific topics. Another example of using mentions. So this blog post mentions some key locations in the UK, including Buckingham Palace. And so again, you could use the word mentions. This is great for blog postings or anything in the creative works. And then here, the Queen is the subject of a TV series called The Crown. SubjectOf is a relatively new property that was just brought out in the last year. And it's really like the reverse of about. And I really like it because similar to my example around the cafe shop, the coffee shop, and the video object, subjectOf is a very more specific one where you can nest the video object together and not have to have two entities on the page. The next topic I wanted to talk about was property value pairs. And this is really used for products and places where you want to get into some more detail about a feature or functionality that's available that perhaps there's not a specific property already defined within that product schema. So the first thing you do is, here I would be marking up a product that's a Canon digital camera, and I'd use the field additional property. And for additional property, I would then create a data item for property value. Now, property value is a way of sort of expressing or representing these new features. And they already have some set things within property value, like max value, min value, measurement, name, description. And so when you're doing this, like ideally you would at least use name and value. So name being like the name of the feature. So in this case, it was megapixel. And then value as to like, what's that value? And think of those as like free variables that you can use. Now there's also a property called unit code, and unit code refers to the UNC fact definitions. You can also find them very easily on the Good Relations website. And unit code actually refers to then a specific code to represent megapixels. So it's again using a standard code to further define the feature that you're speaking about. The last kind of key topic I want to talk about was main entity of page. And main entity of page is where you're calling out that whatever sort of entity you're in or data item you're in is the main topic of the page. And so since I was speaking at Brighton SEO, I thought I'd use their website. So Brighton SEO does 2 big SEO events a year, one in September and one in April. And when you go to their homepage, they have 5 or 6 different items. They have a web page and then 5 different events. And so the question is like, which of these events is the primary event that they're talking about? And so I assumed that the primary event they wanted to talk about was the one that just passed, or the one that was leading up to the event that I spoke at. And so what you would do is, in order to make sure that Google knew that this was the primary event out of those 5, you actually add this property called main entity of page, and then you put the URL of the page that it's on. And what you're really saying here is, out of all those 6 items that are on the page, this is the primary entity of the page, or the main entity of the page, and the main topic of the page. Now, there's some things not to do when doing connected schema markup. One of them is putting the same schema markup on every page. And when I mean the same, I mean like exactly the same. So for example, there's some WordPress plugins that put organization markup on every single page, right? But when you do this, it's not clear which page is primarily talking about the organization. And so you want to put schema markup on the pages about each of those topics. Now, if you have like 1,000 products, you'll have product schema markup on each one, but each of those will be for those individual products. What I don't want to see is that they have like a rating or organization on every page, making it totally not clear as to what page it is. The goal of using schema markup or structured data is to disambiguate what that page is about. And if you're putting it on every page, you're really not doing that. The other piece is like not to create islands of schema. And this is like where, let's say you would create product schema markup on all your product pages, but not actually be clear that the provider is the business, or not linking it to other similar products within the site. This is the key to like creating and informing those knowledge graphs, because your schema markup actually connects to tell a story. Just like the Queen and how she's related to Duncan Jones and how those all link together, the same go on for your business. Just like you were able to infer that you're now 3 degrees from Kevin Bacon from my knowledge graph, think of all the things that Google and other machines can start to infer if you actually connect this all properly. So my name is Martha Van Berkel. I'm the CEO of Schema App. Schema App helps you translate your web content into structured data at scale without having to be an expert and without IT. And thank you for joining me today to learn more about connected schema markup.